Hello and welcome to interest.co.nz. I'm Janae Tibshirani and today I'm joined by the BNZ Chair in Business in Asia at Victoria University, Siah Hwee. Good to see you again, Siah.
Thanks, Jenny.
Today I'd like to talk about how New Zealand can maintain a strong relationship with China when it doesn't always play by the rules. It's ignoring an international tribunal ruling from The Hague that has backed the Philippines in a territorial battle in the South China Sea. There are also claims Chinese manufacturers have been breaking trade agreements by dumping excess steel in New Zealand. And there are claims of widespread mortgage and immigration fraud being committed in New Zealand. Siah, we clearly need to maintain a good relationship with China, but how do we do this without getting burnt?
I think I don't necessarily think that we are in any bad position with China per se, right? I think some of the things that we are actually observing in terms of, say, steel, property, and other things are actually happening in other countries as well, right? So as I always say, look, if there's anything, right, it's not a bad signal sometimes, because if actually China is not interested in anything that got to do with us, then we're in trouble. Right, because it means that we are not in front of them at all, right? So it's important to recognize that, despite the fact that there are a few problems here and there, and that's because I think China is facing a period whereby they start to feel a lot more stressful in terms of growth, expectations, and we all know that it's going to slow down. But there's a lot of this kind of infrastructural change within China, and it needs to grow quickly, right? Debts are rising, consumption is going up, but still not fast enough, and money seems to be, coming out of China much faster than it used to be, right? So there's a lot of this kind of movements going on, and to which I think the country on its own is very stressful, and now I think it's hoping that the rest of the world will work with it, and well, whether the rest of the world will work with it or not, we don't know. But at the end of the day, I think they want to push forward a lot of things and they need a lot of support. I think that's where I think New Zealand is not standing in their way. In some ways, actually, we have a lot more to offer to them because we are always going to be a very neutral country in dealing with China compared to a lot of other countries out there.
So it's sort of a matter of taking some of the bad with the good, and we know there is so much good. We do rely on China so much, and our economy has benefited so much from that relationship. Yeah.
I think some of the bad, I would say that is actually, again, not just with us, right? So I think the bad things, about steel, overcapacity, that's why the steel has to come out, I think relates to everyone else, right? And some of the kind of things that, which I think at some point we'll discuss anyway about signals and other things, is actually more towards the bigger economies as opposed to us. But of course, when you have a system in place, you need to apply to all countries, and that's where sometimes we will feel that maybe, right, there are certain things that actually doesn't work nicely with us, but it's actually less of us, but more about the rest of the world as well.
Sure, and actually your view on the situation we're in now with Zespri ties into that. Basically, we're in a situation where Zespri has halted its exports to China, and the timing of, and this is due to a fungus that was discovered on the kiwifruit. This fungus has been around apparently for years and doesn't have any health risks, but the timing of this trade halt is raising a few eyebrows because it coincides with apparently Zespri receiving warnings from China in relation to the steel dumping. So controversial situation. How do you read this, and to what extent do you think this is actually China sending a signal to the world and not just to New Zealand?
Now, let me retract back a bit on the steel incident, right? So, I mean, in terms of, say, New Zealand times, I think, our pace is slightly slower, right? So most of the activities that we are dealing with tends to feel that, okay, there won't be a lot of things happening within a short period of time. But, we're talking about China pace here. The pace in China is so fast that accidentally the steel incident is too close to the Zespri incident, right? So there's a tendency to have a bit of memory, sort of a recent memory kind of thinking around, okay, they must be related. But I don't think it's actually about that, right?
So you believe the government when it says they're not related?
Yeah. I mean, they have different perspective. My understanding around what is going on with a bit of Zespri issues is not typical about just Zespri, and it's not about New Zealand and China, right? If you actually go back to what they have been trying to do in the last 2-3 years, has been about structural reforms, and one aspect of structural reforms is about quality. right? And talk about quality, and I really tell you another example about what happened recently with the IKEA case. So IKEA sells, chairs, drawers, and all these other things, furnitures in China. So what they have done is that they have discovered a kind of faulty dresses to which, seemingly will hurt young children, right, in America. And they actually recall everything, right, in the America context. Now, they did that after a bit of pressure in South Korea, but actually they refused to withdraw, totally recall all the so-called addresses from China, to which, of course, overnight the Chinese consumers put so much pressure that in the end they withdraw. But the argument from IKEA is that we don't recall those because we meet the standards that you, as in China, expects, right? So there's nothing wrong with our behavior. But of course, Chinese consumers says, but we also deserve what the rest of the world deserves. So maybe regardless of the authorities or the authorities' expectation, we should still have safe dresses like Americans and South Koreans, right? So basically, they want that quality, right? And that coupled with the fact that the government actually goes through a structural reforms about quality, right? It pushed them a lot more towards to make sure that all the products, services, and goods and everything that you think about needs to have some level of quality, right? I mean, no doubt, of course, this single case comes out, of the fact that, it has been there for years, and then all of a sudden it just shows up at the wrong time, I would say.
Yeah.
But at the same time, you must think in terms of what they actually want to do is to try to send more and more signals out to the fact that first, quality is important. Second, we are no longer trying to take just the quantity, we want the quality as well. So many signals are being sent in the same case, and it's not towards us, it's actually more towards the rest of the world.
Okay, see, that's a really, really interesting point. Look, jumping to something related but slightly different, you've recently written an interesting column for us about protectionism and about how China is kind of biting back at the US and the EU, which are imposing protectionist policies. How do you think New Zealand fits into that? If China is going on the offensive when it comes to protectionism, we're such a small player, we don't have much bargaining power. How do we survive in that sort of environment?
Yeah. No, I think this mentality starts to show up from China because, if we go back to the understanding of 2001 when China got accession into the World Trade Organization, there was a 15-year condition around, tariffs, on their goods, right, or services, right, that they provide. Basically, they have to be comparable sort of products across. So in other words, if there's anything that is too cheap, they will have to face a lot of anti-dumping tariffs. And that's been imposed for 15 years now. So the argument comes when, the European Union and now the Americans as well says that, look, 15 years is up, but we still have to approve it, right? But the Chinese understanding is that 15 years is actually automatic. Right, okay. And that's where they start to have this crash of thinking as to what that means 15 years ago. Okay, and so there's a lot of arguments around that, and China is now trying to push forward because it's actually a very sort of a difficult situation for them because they are trying to get some sort of positioning in the world about their comparative advantage. But by imposing all this anti-dumping forever, they will never ever get any advantage in any other country, right? So which means that everything has to sell at the local prices, right? So there's no way they can outcompete some of the local players for that same reason. And for that same reason, then we actually go back to the thinking around, if that happens now, their bargaining power is stronger, and they will start thinking along those lines like, okay, you always talk about us and this and that. Okay, let's think about whether you want our market or not, right? Maybe you want our market, but we don't have to give you the market like we want to access your market too, but you also need our market. So unfortunately, as much as we see most recent cases about China's investment abroad and buying everything and other thing else, China as a market is still a biggest market, one of the biggest market around. So a lot of countries are still investing there, right? And so the bargaining power gets switched. So people are starting, or in China, they are starting probably to think about the fact that let's swap, right? You need my market as well. So let's not consider that that's not part of the bargaining, right? And that's where you have all this thinking around the fact that we could be protectionism, like you guys, like European Union in particular, right? So there are more and more requests going around. So it's not just about steel as well, right? So the most recent case is the Australian and Brazilian iron ore is now being challenged that they actually go too cheaply into China, right? So a lot of countries are taking a lot of heat from this thinking around the fact that, okay, if countries, in particular in the European Union, they are not allowing Chinese to actually send in cheaper products, then we are not allowing other products to come into China as well. So it's a tit for tat.
And that's huge. If we just think, Australia being close to us, if the iron ore price is already low, and that's growth in China is already slowing, and if we add this protectionist sort of thing into this scenario, that's detrimental.
Yeah, and also from the New Zealand's perspective, I think our trade is not very heavy going with them, and we actually still, at the end of the day, bargaining power is definitely, dropping by the day, because China is becoming a stronger and stronger economy over time, and in the world stage as well. And more importantly, I think from our perspective, as long as we maintain the fact that we actually have premium products or good quality products, charged at a fair price, I think that's the most important one. Now, because China is starting to actually sort of open up and start to think that, okay, let's look for items to which we can challenge the rest of the world, right? As to why are you giving us sort of not very high quality products for a very expensive price, or why are you sending a lot of quantity but not quality products to us? Why do we deserve less, right?
Sure.
So they are slowly picking up one by one bits and pieces, not against individual countries, but picking out quite a few things. Like, for example, last week they decided not to send in more. 2 weeks ago, they decided not to send some raw materials to European Union, to which European Union says, since when you don't have to send this to us, right? And China say we need our own raw material, so why should I send it to you?
Sure.
Right? I mean, so then now they're arguing over at the World Trade Organization about some of these sort of, I need to conserve my energy, why should I give it to you? Right? So a lot of these kind of things is actually going on, and we are just part of the picture, but as long as we keep our positioning right, we should be okay. It's probably because it's, as I said, it's not really about us.
Yeah. And look, see, I think we'll leave it there, but that's a key point. We seem to think that signals being sent out are directed to us, but it's key to realise that we are a player in the world, and China's communicating with the globe. So key message there. Thank you so much for sharing that with us. Really appreciate it.
Yeah.
And I'm Janae Tibshirani from interest.co.nz.